Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Committee of the Whole work session today. We're here supporting community through quality public service. Today, July 18th. And if we look at our agenda, we have our minutes from last month, from June 20th. And then we have a presentation by Visit Cook County regarding our 1% lodging tax report. And so I see that Linda and Nick are here if you'd like to come forward. Welcome to both of you. Thank you. Well, good morning, and we appreciate you coming. We appreciate today.
This isn't something new. This is a requirement on behalf of the 1%. We always come to you after the approval of our budget each year, which was approved last week by the Visit Cook County Board of Directors. And we come and present the 1% budget to all of you. I think, Deb, you're the only person that's new to this process. I know, right? So, be gentle. Oh, it's very easy. So for your information, the 1% budget is that additional 1% approved at the county level, not part of the Minnesota State Statute 469.190, I think that's it, for 3% lodging tax. And we worked hard for the last year and a half, 2 years, worked with this body, presented many times, and happy to say that we received 15-year approval at the state legislature for another 15 years of collecting that 1%. The 1% budget and the 1% use of those dollars is really kept in Cook County. And I'm going to let Nick walk through a few, have Nick, not let him. Please, Nick, walk through some of the work that we do. You can probably see, I know, yeah, we have the budget and it was in the packet. And I know we just did one little flyer on some of the events and programming that we support through 1%, as well as the full budget, I believe, was in your packet.
Okay.
Take it away, Nick.
So included in the packet was kind of this little snapshot of just some of the examples of what the 1% supports. It's obviously much more than that, but it's a great kind of just quick look at the wide variety of things. I think it's important to know, as many of you do, that it's a combination of things where we partner with or provide allocations to based on the decisions by the tourism associations that make all the decisions based on how they want to spend the 1% that's collected in their district. Whether it goes toward some other organizer, whether it's a local nonprofit, it might be an organizer that is like Lifetime with Lutz and 99er, that's from outside Cook County, but hosts the event here and invest those dollars here, or it might be something that Visit Cook County produces, whether it's Moose Madness Family Festival, biggest blueberry contest coming up along Gunflint Trail, those kind of things. So wide variety of things, different types of programming. There is a large investment in a couple different categories, as you can see when you run down the list: music and art, and then kind of outdoor recreational things, which include sort of our outdoor sports too. A number of races we have in the budget. Nothing new there as far as the races go, but it's very diverse and broad. And we're really proud of that. New to the budget this year, a couple things I'll point out. One is mention music, a lot of investment in music over the years. The Gunflint Trail Association, following kind of the other associations which have done this for a while, have made a small investment in launching their own music reimbursement program and just trying to incentivize some of the businesses along the trail to host more music and get involved there, which is really exciting. A couple other things, community brand stickers. That's something that was part of the budget last year too, but is carrying over. Discussions from our associations, from our board, were to continue to try and leverage our individual community names. Obviously, we bring everyone under the umbrella of Cook County, but we know there's a lot of power in the individual community names here and what people know from Grand Marais to the Gunflint Trail, Grand Portage, etc. And so we have partnered with an artist, and her name is Lydia Noble. She's from the Twin Ports area, but she's really, really talented, has a lot of connections here, and produced some really, really great designs for us. So we're excited to launch that and just distribute that to partners, and another kind of community brand to work with building awareness project there that we're really proud of. the Leave No Trace project. So in this year's budget, it was originally in last year's budget at a higher amount. And that was to kick off our tourism partnership, an official tourism partnership with the Leave No Trace organization that they do with many destinations around the country. We're proud to be the first in Minnesota to join in official capacity. Obviously, we have a lot of partners here in Cook County that have been involved with Leave No Trace for a long time, but it was an opportunity to kind of bring everyone together. We had a meeting where we brought tourism organizations, representatives from the associations, from local businesses. We had local governments, we had land managers, wide variety of people that were there to kind of come together and talk about what really are the issues here. And then that led to a sort of a tailored tweak on the 7 principles, which we're releasing. We hosted a hospitality webinar recently, and we have our kind of custom form of 7 principles, which we'll be distributing to everyone very soon, and very proud to share that and continue to make sure that sustainability and making sure that we not only educate people, but also it's a branding and marketing tool as well to try and align and connect with the type of high quality visitors that we want here. Heart of Hospitality program has been going on for a while, but just want to mention that again because it's still fairly new, that dedicated dollars that go back into these events that are for our hospitality industry, such as Coffee Break, which we have done the last couple of years in the fall, and that's free coffee for hospitality workers. We did a lunch program that was a little wider in, I think it was February, and that was kind of born out of the big windstorm around the holiday time, and we opened that up to serving, just knowing that the importance from emergency services. So it was hospitality and emergency service workers of all kinds that were able to take part of that program, because they're essential to making sure that we have a safe destination for visitors. So it was a really great program there, and we look forward to doing more of those as well.
I think with that too, we partner and always building that community value in that when we host those programs, we make sure that there's a location within each tourism district. So that's important with both the hospitality, the lunch break, as well as the coffee break.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to make it easy on people to take advantage of it. And then the couple of last things I just want to point out at the very bottom of the budget are really newer things. Some of it was in last year's budget, but emphasis in trying to really grow those shoulder seasons, something we talk about a lot. The first one being the Holiday Harbor Village, which is a new event that the Grand Marais Area Tourism Association has invested in. That is being organized by the downtown businesses, members of the Grand Marais Business Coalition, which is a program within the chamber. Are looking to launch a holiday event that first weekend of December, so things are moving forward there, which is really exciting, because we know it's very quiet at the start of December. And same at the bottom, just quiet time, especially in transition period on the west end. Last year we launched our first Lake Superior Jazz Festival, as well as Glenn Sheen, the world premiere of the cabaret version of that, with some murder mystery dinners as well. And we think that concept has a lot of momentum, and we can build on that. Recently, decision was made to cancel the Lake Superior Jazz Festival after just losing Papa Charlie's, which was the headliner venue, of course, and so it didn't make sense there, but we still think we can do the thematic murder mystery weekend the following weekend, but still just an ongoing effort to try and build that time when some things are needed. So just wanted to point that out there. But those are some of the new things. One other thing, too, that's really worth mentioning is, as we know, the last couple of years with the pandemic treating Cook County very nicely as far as visitor destination and travel goes, which is certainly not what most destinations felt. We know that it was good for a lot of us, but it was very difficult for Grand Portage, depending on that Canadian traveler. And so with the border shutdown, it was very tough. As you might remember from last year's budget, there was an investment from all tourism associations to support events and programs at Grand Portage, and they've done so again this year, which we're really proud to help with, pairing that with continued marketing dollars going towards the Thunder Bay area. That is obviously not just good for Grand Portage, but good for all of Cook County. So just wanted to mention that. Any questions? I just kind of rambled a lot there. And
I just have one more. I had one more added
Yeah.
thought. Thank you for mentioning each of our tourism associations. I think when you look at the budget, as hard as we come to the table with a collective voice of where we can partner in dollars across the tourism associations, it's really important. So you'll see that in some of the events that we support and organize, that they're approved by all 3 associations for the same event. So I think that really builds that community and that collaborative nature of tourism and the events and programming that Visit Cook County supports. So we always make sure to bring every event that we can to the table to see if there's that support felt from, say, Lutz and Tofty for a Gunfront Trail event or something. So.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate all the enthusiasm and energy you bring to the table, and our residents appreciate. It's not just about bringing tourists here, but the people that live here appreciate all that you do and provide for them in terms of, just entertainment and events to look forward to and a way to get their families up here to visit and all of those things. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Ann.
Other questions or comments from commissioners or the administrator? All right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today and all that you do for us.
Thank you.
It's not going to rain today, so go out and enjoy yourself.
Gunfront Trail races.
All right. We're going to move on to item C at this point in time, which is our update on our child care provider subsidy program. And we have a team of people coming up to visit with us. Oh, okay. So maybe as we get started this morning, we can make sure that everybody has an opportunity to introduce themselves, or Allison, perhaps you would like to introduce your team.
Oh, I can let folks introduce themselves, but I'll kick us off. Allison McIntyre, Cook County Public Health and Human Services Director.
Grace Grunager, Public Health Supervisor.
Grace Bouchard, Family and Children's Services Supervisor.
And I'm Nancy Deming. I'm the Licensing Case Manager and Community Child Care Coordinator for the county. Thank you. First, just thank you for just welcoming us, asking us to come and visit with you, show you where we are halfway through this journey of 2023. I'm just so, I'm looking back, it's just exciting to see where we were, and that was only, last August that we were together and even starting to talk about this idea of supporting families and providers. So I appreciate being able to come, share where we are, this halfway point. And sorry about this. I have an obsession with hanging out with very small people that my son made with me, for me, not with me, for me. And so now, ta-da, I have a summer cold, Nana style, so. I think we can get started. We have a little presentation just to be able to keep me on track and show some numbers if those are important to you. I'm happy to also send this out to you so that you can look at it later and then have the bibliography so that you can click and see where these numbers come from, where's this data from. So I'll be happy to, I'll just send that to you. Oh, perfect. Perfect. So I will send that, and then that can be handed out to all of the commissioners. So here we are, January through June. So far, we're kind of the halfway mark. So I'm going to do a really just brief recap and introduction, partly because Commissioner White. Mm-hmm. Yes. Sorry. Again, I kind of have some Dayquil brain, so sorry.
31st.
Yes. So that you, I'm sure. Yes. And I'm sure that living in our community, you've heard about it, but we'll just kind of get all of our mindsets back thinking about childcare, where we started, and then what the wage enhancement program has done so far, the providers' responses so far to how this is working, other funding that we have to support childcare here with the county, the legislative session, what happened there, and then how that's going to impact our providers in our estimation, and also families here in our county. So please stop me if you have any questions, and I'm going to have Grace. We're going to have some other people speak besides this croaky frog over here as we talk as well. So, so kind of a little brief recap. So many of you probably know that I came here to the county from SMC, from our Early Childhood Community Navigation Hub. And as a part of that grant, we worked with Wilder Research to do an early childhood needs assessment for Cook County and Grand Portage. That was in 2021. And so that Wilder Research estimated there are 220 children under the age of 5 who live in Cook County where all the adults are working in their household. And at that time, meaning the end of this was in 2021, there were 66 licensed childcare spots to care for those 220 children. So instead of being able to access some licensed providers, parents were just juggling different ways to try to get care for their children. Maybe your grandma's here one day, maybe they're at their neighbor's house one day, maybe they share with another parent, maybe one parent worked a different shift, all kinds of different scenarios that they had to juggle because they didn't have that reliability of licensed childcare for their children at all times. So this lack of childcare has put a significant strain on parents. Obviously, I can't even imagine trying to juggle my child's care. On employers, because maybe now you need a flexible schedule, maybe you can't work full-time, maybe you can't find employees at all, maybe you can't recruit employees to come here because there's a lack of childcare for professionals to be able to come and put their children in childcare. And of course, economic development then is hindered by that as well. So, and in fact, the Wilder research found that the lack of childcare was the #1 most unmet need of families with young children in Cook County. And why is that important? I just want to bring us back to that, because my heart is always just right here on the floor with those babies. This is why that's important. We know that 80% of a child's brain development happens before the age of 3, 90% by the time they're 4. We currently don't have a system in place, although there's a momentum going that way, right, to be able to really fund and support the most important time of a child's life in their brain development, like we do K-12 public schools, right? So there is, like I said, momentum building in that direction, and that's why. Healthy brain development has been proven to provide a foundation for better outcomes for the whole course of a person's life. In fact, in the Heckman equation that we had last year, Allison brought forth and showed some of that data. They estimate that for every dollar that we invest in high quality early childhood care and education, that we save $13 in future spending, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in economic assistance programs, whether it's in unemployment, however that might be, that it would save us that. So the earlier the investment that we have for kids, the better the return. All right. So it's complex. I kind of put this on here because I want you to keep that in mind as we look at some of these other numbers. There's this complexity of balance. Many people, when they come to and start talking about childcare with me, I don't want to go off into the weeds way over here, but they don't realize it's not just me taking my children over to my friend Grace's house and she's just babysitting my kids while I go to work. That's not how it works anymore. There's rules and laws and regulations, and you need education, and then it's expensive for families. How do they pay for that? Maybe this way, maybe that way, maybe the other way. I just learned this week for the first time from my friend Grace that if you work for the federal government, you get a child care stipend. That's huge. That's just huge. I didn't know that before. So now if you didn't know, now you all know. You probably did know. I just didn't know. I don't have any federal employees in my family. So so this balance of child care costs for families, which they all say, way too high, and the cost of care for providers, which they say, way too high. So where do we come here in the middle? Again, I think down the road there's going to be some solutions, but for right now, we're just kind of ourselves juggling and piecemealing it together, right, to support. So here's our starting point last year. I just started with December of 2022 because the wage enhancement program that the county supported started in January of 23. So the starting point was, and there's a little bit of a difference between who is a provider and who is a program. So there was a question about that. So we have licensed programs. However, those programs may have more than one provider that work for them. And I listed all of our licensed programs here along the side. Not all of them are licensed by the county. DHS licensed child care centers, which is what the Y is, and the Tribal Authority of Grand Portage licenses Head Start and early Head Start programs. We don't license them. We work with them and do mentorship and all kinds of other things with them, but we aren't their licensing agent. So we had 6 programs, and between those 6 programs, there are 11 full-time employees, 2 part-time employees. At that time, there were 84 licensed child care spots. However, there were only 72 children being served. And that can be for a few reasons. The most significant one is lack of staff, is why they might be licensed. Like your classroom over at the Y, you'll see their infant room is licensed for 8, but they don't have consistent enough staff to have 8 in care. So they usually have 4. or 5. Maybe they have an extra person here or there. Usually it's staffing. Sometimes it is provider choice. Like maybe I have a few really high needs children this year. So I'm going to just keep 10 instead of, I could have 12, but this year I'm going to have 10 because these kids need more needs. That's part of the beauty of being able to have that family childcare model, that they could adjust it to meet the needs of the kids. So that's where we started. Look at this thing. Do you see this big light blue? It doesn't show up as well here. This is how we're supporting providers right now in Cook County. This wage enhancement is the lighter blue here. You can see here on the left. Essentially 54% of the funding that's been happening right now to support this early childhood workforce is coming from wage enhancement. So wage enhancement turned out, I might quote this wrong. I believe it's 252,000. Like 904 or 409, one of the two. I can look it up for you, but I didn't bring my notes. But I know that it's one of those. So it's approximately $252,000. We also have a deed grant of $180,000 that came to the county in order to be able to recruit and retain childcare providers. Up there, First Children's Finance gave us a $30,000 grant that is only be able to use for startups or expansions of programs. That's the only way we can use that is by expanding slots for programs. And in that little tiny dark blue that you can't see, that's the Northland Foundation. We also have a grant from them, $7,500 for a family, friend, and neighbor program. What they have found in Greater Minnesota is that about 60% of all the care of children in Greater Minnesota outside of their home is provided by a family, friend, or neighbor. A big part of that is kind of like we do. We have centers in Grand Marais. Well, we have childcare, in Grand Marais. But what's happening on the West End? Like there's not. Many small communities, they literally don't have any childcare. So you're going to have to find a family, a friend, or a neighbor, or else you cannot go to work, essentially. So that's why so much of Greater Minnesota care is being provided by those family, friend, and neighbors. And actually the state has recognized that, and they put a permanent funding category to be able to do things to support family, friend, and neighbors providers, which I think is awesome because my dream is to have families be able to choose whatever works best for their family. If they want their child to be at preschool at the school, awesome. If they want their kids to be at Birch Grove, that's great. If they want them to be at one of the Marias, a family, perfect. If they want them to be at grandma's house, awesome. I think that they should be able to have choices instead of like we're just going to gamble and take anything we can possibly get that could be open so we can work, which is what's been happening. Okay. So here's the wage enhancement program to date. So you can see these. So we've had a few changes since we started, which you may or may not be aware of. Birch Grove Saplings Program and Cooperation Station both were recipients of funding from the Public Health Fund. That's right, Public Health Fund. Okay. So because of that, they are not eligible for wage enhancement because part of their grants was to help cover staff expenses and compensation. So what we have done is that Cooperation Station, for example, sends me the same application everyone else does. We're keeping track of their hours and their dollars, and once those hours and dollars go over what we awarded them from the Public Health Fund, if that makes sense, then they can be eligible for wage enhancement for any time that's over and above that. I believe that's 30, is it 30,000 then? I can't recall either that we gave to Cooperation Station. The same would be the case with Birch Grove, but Birch Grove has just chosen to do kind of their own thing and to opt out of wage enhancement, which any program can certainly do. So after we had that, you'll see when I have these numbers up here for how many dollars that we've sent, just because the Y is a larger organization than most of our others, they really are affiliated with the Duluth Y, they're always behind in submitting their applications by a month to 2 months because that's how their HR department works. However, just so you know, all their providers are getting paid their wage enhancement dollars on the 15th of the month. They're just not waiting to pay them until we pay the Y. Does that make sense? Anyone have questions about that? That's what worked out for them, and it doesn't really make a difference to us as long as we get their application. So they're just a little bit behind. So all these numbers will say January to June for everyone else but Cooperation, but the YMCA, because theirs is only January till April, because that's all the data that we have. So if I look here and just programs, we originally had 6, and we still have our 6, Plus, we also added Early Head Start, which came online in February. Early Head Start started. So we have one application for a family care provider who wants to do infant and toddler specialized care. That's in progress, and we're also exploring the ideas with several people down on the West End, with Birch Grove School potentially being able to offer an infant and toddler care program too. So that's just kind of where we are, program-wise, status-wise. So, and then down under providers, so now we have 27 total caregivers. Of those, 15 are full-time and 12 are part-time. So we have an increase of 14 providers, 5 full-time providers and 9 part-time providers for there. And licensed childcare spots, technically, again, we have 131 licensed spots. But as of June, we have 93 children being served with those. So we have 21 extra children being served. And because of some staffing at the Y, they can't run all of their classrooms 5 days a week, full capacity. So that's why they aren't doing that, although they are licensed for more. And also because some eligibility guidelines that are specific to Early Head Start, they have openings there. However, families have to meet the eligibility guidelines before they can bring their children to Head Start or Early Head Start. So they do have room to grow their program there, and they are licensed and ready and have staff for those people when they come. So any other thoughts or questions, just so you can kind of see a little bit of the numbers of where we are. And now I want to talk a little bit, obviously we're meeting during the day. I can't really bring a bunch of childcare providers normally here during the day because they're doing what they love to do, home taking care of children, or in their facility doing the same. So we asked them at the childcare mentorship meeting, kind of how has this been making a difference so far? We've gone through the first 6 months, and what are your thoughts? And so Emily Marshall at the Y told us that she had positions posted for all of 2022. They're positions that pay fairly well as far as on our scale, as far as compared to other places. They have full benefits. She said she had no applicants for the entire year. But then with us talking about the wage enhancement program, people finding out about it, she's like, I have applicants. It's amazing. And she hasn't lost any providers, which there's a high turnover rate in childcare, partly because of the low wages and lack of benefits. So that worked for her. Maria Conlon told us that the wage enhancement is literally going to pay her utilities and her expenses because, as you know, probably in your homes, the cost of everything has increased so much over this last year or two. And now childcare providers are faced with the fact that many of these programs that were kind of boosted during COVID with pandemic funds are now cutting back to their pre-pandemic reimbursement rates, which is very difficult for providers up here because they for food, for example, cutting back to their rate, it makes a significant difference when you're talking a couple dollars a day less for each child in your program to buy food for. And I know that the food I buy at the store is not less expensive now than it was before the pandemic. So, Maria Carlson, boy, when she was talking with us in our meeting, she brought me to tears because she had tears in her eyes when she said that for the first time in a long time, she feels seen and valued by her community because of the wage enhancement program. It's not for her so much about the dollars. It's that someone sees and values what she's doing every day. She said that she knows her families value it, but to be able to have the county and people in the community come and talking about it shows that what she does has value. And we know that, but we sometimes forget to tell people that, right? And she's now able to do some things in her program she could never do before because all those things come out of her pocket. If she wants to buy new supplies or equipment or anything for her program, that's coming out of her pocket. So now she's able to do some of those things. And talking with Jared, he's always telling me that his teachers are so appreciative of having that. They have to abide by essentially the Head Start, Early Head Start wage scales, which again are not like set for Cook County, right, where it's a lot more expensive to live. So having this extra wage enhancement lets some of his staff really be able to, live and survive, and not just have to work this job and a couple of other jobs. So they're very appreciative of that.
Just to interject
please do.
something here too is that childcare. We can think of the positive side of providing that care to families, and that's really important. A lot of families who move here move here and they don't have aunts and uncles and established relationships who can care for their kids. And so the child care providers become their primary person to help them with their child development and help them with their care. And they're on the front lines of hearing a lot of things about children. Maltreatment reports we receive. Kids feel comfortable and safe to disclose things to child care providers because they have a safe, consistent relationship. We've had providers have to testify in criminal cases where a child has disclosed to the child care provider. So that consistency, again, the relationships that are developed is very powerful for child safety, and it also is an emotional burden that it's easy, when you turn the lights off, that emotional burden of knowing what's going on with that child and their family, it doesn't go away. So I just think that's just a component, it makes a difference because there's, what we see, taking kids for walks and things like that is just the tip of the iceberg. It's all that relationship and the depth of processes of interacting with families. That's really, that's also not talked about as much, and it's more challenging to quantify that, but I just wanted to point that out as well.
Thank you, Grace. That's very important. I had a question about exactly how much wage enhancement we've paid out to various programs. So I wanted to throw those numbers up here for you to see, and they'll be in your slide deck to look at them. So they're just listed here, how I had them listed on my list. So we have both of the Marias separately. Maria Conlon also has 2 part-time people who come and help her, especially in the summer when she runs larger numbers. She runs 14 numbers in the summer. She has to have another provider. Graham Portage, so that's the regular Head Start and the early Head Start, the YMCA. We originally budgeted, essentially, if I just took the 252 that was approved and divided it in half, it would come out to be about 126.4. Is what would have been budgeted for the first 6 months. And then the dollars that we spent so far are about $70,000. About almost $56,000 less than what we had budgeted. Part of that's because we don't have Birch Grove in there, and we don't have Cooperation Station in there, so that is part of it. I could have looked at the numbers, but Cooperation Station, my guess, would probably come in between Maria Conlon and the Cook County Y. Just knowing their numbers that I've seen, as far as reimbursement, they would probably have come in that part in between the two, just with their staff numbers, because they have 4 staff at Cooperation Station. So there are the actual numbers of where we are so far in the year. Does anyone have questions about those now? You just want to wait till the end?
I just reiterate that the reason that Cooperation Station and Birch Grove aren't participating is because they applied for and were granted funding through the Public Health Fund. And due to the timing with requesting the one-time use of fund balance to support the wage enhancement program and a request for proposals for the Public Health Fund, that was something that we were, working with the providers to let them know about the uncertainty and how that would affect their application for the Public Health Fund.
Yes, absolutely. And just in case the question comes up, I did include the numbers that I received and we submitted for June, although they maybe were approved this morning. Or maybe they will be in 2 weeks. I'm not sure when they're approved, but when you approve June's numbers, they're already in these numbers. They aren't additional ones that you'll be approving in the budget for this month. Does that make sense? I just pulled those out and put them in there. So, okay. So I want to just kind of go over real briefly our other things that we have, other workforce fundings, because here's kind of a little bit of a complexity. So when we originally were talking, we said, yes, there's other grant programs, and we are applying for them. We did, and we've gotten some. However, guess what? These other grant programs, I honestly don't know of another grant program. However, there's some working on in the legislature, and it'll be ready in about 4 years. That will allow you to use grant funds to provide ongoing stipends to providers. No, they don't have that. I can't do that. So far, there could be something, there's not something I know of, or that we have applied and have been granted. What we did apply for a grant and were granted was the Child Care Economic Development Grant from DEED. And we received that, we signed those papers in February, and it's $180,000. And essentially, it's to recruit and retain. So you can see there's 6 different aspects of the things that the DEED grant is providing for. So it's providing hiring bonuses to incentivize joining, our existing organizations and expand, or to start a new business. So they can have hiring bonuses. We have monthly mentorship meetings that we're already doing. It provides a stipend for their time. The mentorship meetings actually are funded by Northland Foundation, and they're through the school district. However, we provide stipends. Krista Olson and I do them together. We provide stipends to the employers for the providers for their time to be there. The substitute pool of providers that I'm doing the training for, these substitutes that would be able to go into any program, so that we hopefully will help reduce or eliminate some program closures because people have to be gone or are ill or on vacation. Some different training and technical assistance that they can have their time put towards, as well as the cost of that. So a big thing in this area is earning your child development associate credential. Then you are allowed that qualifies you to be a lead teacher in a classroom. It takes about 120 hours. There's observations involved, 120 hours of studying different things. There's observations involved. You have to work 480 hours in a center or as a provider, and then you can be awarded your CDA. But it costs about like $900 with all those steps for them, and then they're spending that 120 hours not being paid. So we are helping to provide stipends to help pay for that and to help pay for some of those costs. And then finally, we have a subsidized slot program. This is something that we're just kind of rolling out because it's taken us a little while to figure out how it's going to work best with our own accounting systems and other people's. So this is, so for instance, not that anyone's agreed to this, but for instance, my proposal would be to the Y, you're licensed for 8 providers. 2 days a week you can have 5 babies, the other 3 you can only have 4. And there might be some on the wait list, but she doesn't have staffing. There are some on the wait list. She doesn't have staffing to have 8 babies every day. So if we help subsidize some of those slots, that's how the grant was written, we'll subsidize some of those slots so that you will get people off the wait list. Because you're not going to add an extra teacher when you have 5 kids, because you're paying a teacher for 4 kids and the same teacher for 1, essentially. So to make money, you have to have more, that higher ratio. So, but if we help subsidize that in between, then she can hire another teacher to go in there and make that case to the Duluth Y HR that we should be able to hire one, because then we have 6 months to get all those slots filled, if that makes sense. But in the meantime, it will get some of those infants off the wait list and into a classroom. So that's the idea behind the subsidized plot program. Other workforce funding, like I mentioned before, we have a $30,000 grant to fund startup or expansion projects that directly increase the number of available spots for families. So far, we granted the Cook County YMCA a little less than $7,000 to replace the flooring in the infant room, which they needed to do in order to be able to open the infant room, which they did in April of this year. And we also have this Northland Foundation Family Friend and Neighbor Grant. With that, I've made some resource kits for family friend and neighbor providers. And okay, guess what? Family friend and neighbor providers are also your neighbor girl who comes to watch your kids so that you can go and be a grown-up somewhere, right? So we have those two. I partnered with the Safe Sitter program that the school does to provide resource kits for them as well with that grant. And then we host family socials. That's I just love. These junior learner engagement events that we let families come to, providers come to, bring their kids. We let them explore and create and take things home, and it's just fun to be able to have that time together with parents and kids. So let's go on to a little bit about the legislative wins, and then I'm going to kind of turn this over to Grace Grenager for a little bit. So during this legislative session, there were a lot of initiatives put forward that were approved for early care and education in some way or form. But these are the ones that will directly affect childcare in our communities right now. So the Child Care Assistance Program, which you'll hear us call that CCAP, the reimbursement rate was raised from 50% of market value to 75% of the market rate. Okay, and that went into effect immediately, I think, yes. The Early Learning Scholarships Program will be expanded to include children from birth through age 3. Before, you had to only be essentially 3 or 4. Once you turn 5, then you have no more scholarship, even if you weren't age eligible to go to kindergarten. So now they've expanded it from birth till you're age eligible to go to kindergarten. Even if you turn 5 in November, you can still have your scholarship for the rest of that year. And the Great Start compensation support payments, which Grace can probably speak a lot better to than I, they're going to replace the stabilization grants that were put into place in 2021 for providers. There's a committee that's been charged with researching and developing both a wage scale estimate for family home providers, which is very difficult to be able to estimate. I am keeping track of, for example, both of the Marias send me the actual number of hours they work in a month. However, because of discussions that we've had, we only reimburse up to 40 hours a week. They work way more than 40 hours a week, the two Marias, in their own programs. I'm keeping track of the actual number of hours, even though we can only reimburse for up to 40 in a week. And it's not just the Marias. There are Lynn Shields up at Head Start. You know, by the time you're doing your lesson planning and getting things ready, she's working way more than 40 hours a week. It's very typical. So how do you find what that wage estimate should be when you know these providers are working 50, 60 hours a week? And there's also another committee that has been charged with creating a cost of care estimation model as well. And finally, there will be a creation of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to help centralize some of these services from between the different agencies who currently have them. So we'll see how that goes. All right, how are some of those things going to affect our family? Oh, I have to go back. See that? Those kids belong to me. They're the ones who gave me this golf. Just so you know. Okay, there you go. Okay, so how are they going to affect us? Grace put together this great little chart just so that you can see these COVID stabilization grants for child care workers per FTE, how they fluctuated in 2022 and then in through 2023. So it wasn't a consistent amount. They have a formula, they figure it out. And the stabilization grants were required 70% of that funding was required to support staffing costs. 30% of that funding could be used to cover other operating expenses. Their full-time equivalent was 32 hours. All local providers have participated in this program since it began. So they ended in June of this year. They're being replaced by transition grants until January 1st is when they're supposed to have the Great Start compensation program to be finalized. So some estimates are it's going to be between 260 and I've seen about 375 because no one really knows the exact formula that they're going to use. Month per FTE to support wages and benefits. So if I took the FTE of 32 hours the state uses it and translates it to the 40 hours that we use, it basically will average out to about $1.64 an hour for an FTE based upon 40 hours. And you'll have these numbers to take a look at. But just kind of how that has worked in. So again, Grace did a wonderful job of being able to provide me with some scenarios because she has such a great background in paying the bills and working on all these grants for cooperation stations. So in August of last year, when we came to the board, the provider wage was about $15.30 an hour. That did not include the stabilization grants because honestly, different organizations have handled that differently with their people. Obviously, if you're one of the independent providers, like the Marias, then that comes to you, and you decide how that's going. The YMCA took part of the 70%, which is completely allowed under the program, and applied it to their benefit costs. So all of those dollars did not go into the hands of providers. They also counted it as a hazard pay. So it's being paid out every month. It just depended on what worked in that system. So it's a little bit different. If you hear like, oh, I only got this much, I got this, it's because the systems work themselves a little bit different than what. And they have the right to do that. It was created to be that way. So we raised the average to about $21.09 an hour with the $5.79 wage enhancement program per hour. So here's the first scenario that I would ask for you to think about. So in the first 6 months of 2023, child care providers have been receiving funds from both wage enhancement and the stabilization grants, okay? So in order to best support providers, we might look at different ways that we could be able to continue the wage enhancement program in its current form. Because as they lose that, and then their stabilization grants, are kind of fluctuating as well, it will make a significant impact for providers. And then scenario 2 is that we could consider, when we get to that point, by decreasing our hourly stipend by $1.64 an hour to account for the Great Compensation Program payments. So then that would reduce our hourly rate to $4.15 an hour. Again, we're looking at next year, so if there's a cost of living increase, about 3% that they estimate from the Bureau of Labor then and Statistics, then we'd be looking more like $4.27 an hour. So there's just a couple of scenarios for you to be able to think about provider impact. Okay, and then I'm going to let Grace take this because she, again, has so much wonderful lived experience about how do these programs that we just talked to you about, the CCAP reimbursement rate going up, early learning scholarships being more funded, how is that going to affect our families? Because remember, it's a balance. I talked about the providers. Grace is going to share with us about the families.
So I did pull some data on what the population looks like. Like every year we have roughly 30 to 40 infants born in the county. So this data is from 2021 because that's the latest data that we have from the state. So in 2021 there were 34 infants born. And of those, there were 18 who were enrolled in WIC, which is a food and nutrition assistance program. There were 13 enrolled in medical assistance, which is a health insurance support program. And then this is where it's not exactly apples to apples, but I was able to find out how many are currently receiving childcare support through the childcare assistance program. And that is 7. So this is 2023, not 2021. And then for the early learning scholarships, that is also 7. And I will note that it is impossible to tell if that is 14 children or somewhere between 7 and 14 children because you can be eligible for both programs at the same time. So childcare assistance pays a portion of childcare costs depending on your income. And then you could also be receiving an early learning scholarship to fill the gap between what you're getting from CCAP and the cost of care. So people are piecing together the assistance that they're eligible for. But, you know, that is birth to 5. So 7 to 14 children in the county receiving any type of support for childcare payments, and roughly 35 babies born a year. So if you do the math, you know, that's roughly, and it's over 150. I mean, if we use Nancy's number of 220 children, birth to 5, who are in need of childcare, 7 to 14 would be receiving any type of financial assistance. So when we looked at that, that scale, there's support to providers, which is a lot of what Nancy talked about, and that's what the wage enhancement program has been. But on the side of support to families, there really aren't a lot of options. So this shows kind of, we talk about how many kids are in WIC or in medical assistance versus the childcare support programs, and a lot of it has to do with income limits. So this is the income limits for a family of 4 to receive this type of support. So if you're a family of 4, you can be making up to $82,500 and qualify for nutrition assistance through WIC. And it's the same for medical assistance. If you're enrolled in medical assistance, you're automatically eligible to participate in WIC. So there is some nuance there, but essentially if you're in medical assistance, you can go ahead and be in WIC as well. For childcare assistance program, the income limit for a family of 4 is $55,266. And for the early learning scholarships, which at this point we're still 3 and 4 year olds only, that's $51,338 for a family of 4. So I think what is happening is that there are a number of families kind of between those two eligibility windows. So between that 50 to 55,000 to 82,500 for a family of 4, and suddenly they're not eligible for the child care assistance, even though they may be receiving other assistance programs through PHHS. So I did put together a couple scenarios using DEED data, and Nancy pulled through DEED the child care market rate survey. So the average cost of child care in the county per child is $12,558 per year per child. So it's a significant cost for families. And when we look at some of the in-demand jobs that I pulled from DEED's website for Cook County, so I used nursing assistant, a cook, a server, and a teacher. You can just kind of paint a picture in your mind of who is not receiving child care assistance, although they may be struggling with the cost of care. So these are some imaginary scenarios. So imagine that family of 4 has 2 working parents and 2 kids in care. One parent is nursing assistant, making about $35,000 a year. One parent is a cook, making about $31,000 a year. So their annual income would be about $66,000. And the cost for childcare for 2 in their home would be about $25,166, or 38% of their income. But they're not eligible for any financial assistance for childcare with the current programs we have. Another scenario, another family of 4, again, when you look at the income eligibility, it's a table, right? So it says this is how many people are in your family, this is the income limits. So I just, for ease of understanding, based it all on 4. It's a fairly common family size. So if you had a teacher making about $64,000 a year as one parent, and then another parent as a server making about $25,000 a year, their annual income would be $89,000. The cost of care for their 2 kids in childcare would be $25,166 per year, or 28% of their income. But again, they're not eligible for any type of financial assistance for care. So this could be a situation where you might see, for example, the parent earning less money, leaving the workforce to reduce the stress of trying to juggle the cost of childcare with, just staying home and caring for your kids. So even with just the one income, if one parent left the workforce, this family would still not be income eligible, with one parent, in this example, a teacher, making $64,000 a year for care for those 2 kids. So the impact on families is pretty significant. When we look at those slots that are there that aren't filled, sometimes it's that, we see parents having their kids in care 1 or 2 days a week and then shuffling schedules so that one parent is home the other time, because that's just the only way they can financially make it work for their kids. So it's great that we have CCAP, it's great that we have early learning scholarships, but it really does not support childcare costs for the majority of working parents in the county at this point, just because of the low income eligibility guidelines. And I'll hand it back to Nancy.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So then we're kind of wrapping up here. Just trying to plant that idea again, that balance really is only going to be able to be achieved if we're going to be supporting both providers and families. Again, I know this is our vision down the road, but that's when we shore up one and the other one's still falling off the cliff, right? So how can we be advocates for our communities, for our families and our children, to say we need better supports for both sides of this scale so that we have reliable, high-quality childcare. It's a foundation for our economic development, for the well-being of our community, to be able to have those providers there. So we want to be able to do that as well. And I'm going to let Grace Brichard talk a little bit about just some of her experience too with in Health and Human Services, and some of the providers are good enough to send me some pictures of them with their kids, so you can see exactly who's out there. And they aren't all of them. I only have one little tiny picture from the Y. But we have the rest. Maria Conlon, you can see with a bunch of her kids on different field trips. The Head Starts and Early Head Starts, and Maria Carlson as well. So, that's why I do what I do, is because of that. Is because I want to see that. Because it brings joy to my heart to see children running and playing in the woods and in the water and learning and exploring and being supported by competent, well-qualified caregivers.
Yes, well, thank you so much, and I won't go on much longer. I just want to thank everybody, Nancy and Grace, for everything that you provided. And again, that my lens as a family services worker and working with kids who may have experienced harm, really, my lens, I really value having those stable child care providers as, number one, trusted people who can be people who children can talk to if they need help, but also because we see truancy, we see children being at home alone for extended periods of time, watching their younger siblings when they aren't old enough to do that. These kinds of scenarios come into place when we don't have stable and consistent enough child care. And so it's just valuable. As much as we love seeing things go well, we also have to think about the harm that might be coming to other kids who are being placed in the responsibility of watching their siblings or taking care of children when they're old enough to do that and when they need care themselves. So it's a whole package, and it's a continuum of supports, and I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to share this information.
Thank you. I add my appreciation again for that. And I know that, I didn't know, we have Kelsey here, Kennedy, and she was going to share just a little bit from a parent perspective. And I didn't know, Pat, if you wanted to add anything from a business perspective. Pat Campanero was gracious enough to print out some things that we can let you take a copy of, and then you can look at them later. That came from actually our community childcare conversations event that we held at Cook County Higher Ed.
I have a 5-year-old now, but we did IVF with my kiddo, and so we knew when she was getting born before most people get to know. And with that being said, we put in requests at all of the providers, and we didn't get a call for 2 years to get her into a care facility, and that was for me for 2 days a week, which didn't actually meet our needs at all, because I work more days than that, and my husband is a contractor in our community, and that was also not work for his schedule. And people said often, I think you're going to ask me, that they had to step away. Well, my job actually requires me to be there most of the time. So my husband is who stepped back some. My mom and dad also popped in and were able to, as seniors in the community that are retired, with quotation marks, became the daycare providers, which was great until my mom suffered a paralyzing stroke and was not able to be the provider for our child. And then we went back to that whole scrambling for what can we do for care. We got very lucky that we got into Maria Tomlins, and she was able to provide care only because she was already caring for my niece, and it was all that just who you know in the right spot, the right time, and really just her being the sweetest that she had to get permission from the other parents to allow us to be able to join in. And that was sort of a grace. I had a business at the time, I worked full-time, that was not going to be an option. My husband is, again, as working for housing, the person that stepped back mostly in our lives. And then, so that all went forward. We had COVID, that all got kind of complicated in that world. We ended up going to another provider at one point, and they ended up closing. And so just thinking of the instability of that and how that impacts families and the last minute changes, and how do you plan for the future for what you can do for your occupation, what can you do for your spouses, what options do they have, and also for the consistency of our children, right? My child has been at a variety of providers. We are now at the play school, which we are so grateful. We're at preschool. And we did 2 years of preschool because honestly it was a more affordable choice for us. And it was great, and we were super glad to have it, but it was at 3:15. And so we had that whole shuffle of what do you do in the afternoon. We also had the question of what happens in the summer. There's no automatic daycare provider if you are in a preschool program that fills that spot. It ends up always being every single year you're reassessing, and maybe it's not even a year, maybe it's every couple months, to be honest, depending on what's happening. And all our providers in the community are amazing, and we're super lucky. And there's a certain cost associated with that we're all dealing with, and wanting to pay our providers more, and making sure that they're making whatever wage supports them in doing what they're doing, but also to the challenge of families of how can we support our lifestyles and living in the community and staying here when those are challenges. One of the things that I think was just mentioned was we got offered two spot, or that spot was 2 days a week, which was not going to work for us. But the counter to that was that we were offered a 5-day a week, which I only work 4 days. So then you're paying for an extra day that you may not actually need. But you want to make sure your provider is getting covered with that. It just becomes, you are not selecting a facility based on maybe your values or what you can afford. You're basically just saying, they choose whatever spot. And we're very lucky that our providers in the community are so incredible that it isn't like you're walking into a spot that isn't good, but it isn't maybe what fits your family perfectly, or what would be the best financially for you, or what fits your schedule of your work day. We are just all doing our best to make it work, I think, both providers and families. And I think we're in a lucky spot. We've been able to make it work as best as we can, but that's an easy story. I know people that have much harder stories. And during the presentation today night, we all talked about how every story that we had for a lot longer, because every single story has more challenges than the first year. It's not like you just get into a provider and that solves it. As I was mentioning, it's continuation that you can go on until your kid's in school, and even then there's different challenges. That's
I think hearing from a parent is a great way to conclude this, because it really points to all of what we know and what we've heard today, hearing what struggles parents go through. And we know there's many people in the community that go through the struggles. I know we all have lots of questions, and so we appreciate, Nancy, the fact that you're going to send us the PowerPoint so we have that information, and know that we are going to be contacting you with questions, because this is a really important issue that we need to take a look at for our community and for our whole state and our nation as well. So thank you very much for presenting today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, so we're on to our Superior National Strategic Planning Report. We have a group coming from the EDA. So I know you've had a long wait this morning, but we have a lot of important agenda items today, and we appreciate you bringing this forward to all of us.
That was very interesting.
Very enlightening.
Committee of the Whole and staff, thanks for having us here today. I am Steve Serbaugh, local business owner and president of the EDA, among other things. I am not a golfer today, but I did play with my grandpa growing up. These days I'm too busy doing things like this to think about playing golf. We are here today to talk to you about some of the results of Superior National's Board of Governors, EDA members, and concerned citizens found during a multi-day strategic planning session. Even though I'm not a golfer today, I believe strongly that it's an important asset for the county. The golf course is truly world-class with respect to its natural beauty. Unfortunately, as we all know, most of the businesses in this community are highly seasonal, and that peak season is short, and that, of course, affects the golf course. Since the county mandated renovation, the course has struggled to pay its people what they are worth and have been unable to maintain the course in the way that it was documented after the renovation. Additionally, all golf courses need major rehab projects periodically, and the revenues have not allowed for setting money aside for this. And there have not been enough employees, and the employees that have been there for years have been underpaid. My personal opinion is that the success or failure of the golf course has been measured for many years on the success or failure of the profit and loss. I don't believe this is the correct way to look at it. It's an amenity that draws people in and also provides a part of the landscape of the county as a whole. Superior National is an anchor attraction, and so I'd encourage you to think about it like Lutsen Mountains, Minnesota State Parks, Grand Portage National Monument, Spear Hiking Trail, Pincushion Mountain Recreational Area, snowmobile trails, and the list, of course, goes on and on. Now I'll pass it to Mike.
Well, thank you again, and commissioners. I, by the way, have a tendency to be long-winded, so I'll try to capture this. But I think Steve does such a great job because he just cuts to the chase. And, you know, we've been business partners for years, and he cuts to the chase, and I go long-winded. So I'm going to try to summarize as best I can. But I think it's really important when we look at the golf course to understand the whole thing. Right back from the very beginning, and Commissioner Storley, you were there with Daryl when when this whole thing started, and I remember you sitting there. But just, so right here, and I'm sure you guys have gone through, there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of detail. But I'm going to just try to capitalize it as quick as I can. So, because I think it's important for the big picture. So, real quick, and the dates, I may be off a little bit, but I'll just kind of summarize it. So, back in 1987, 1986, somewhere in there, the George Nelson family said, look, LTTA, here's some land, build a golf course. So LTTA received a planning grant from the IRRB and hired a gentleman by the name of Senior Joe Much. He came out of Oregon. He's with the National Golf Foundation. And basically he said, from a climate perspective, you're in northern Minnesota, the agronomy works for a golf course. And that was a big question. I mean, how do you do a golf course? Right next to Lake Superior. He said it works, but be aware that your season will be short. But from a horticulture, agronomy perspective, it works. Okay, great. So we've got land, we've got the study, and then LTTA hired the Northspan Group out of Duluth. Many are familiar with the company. They came up and did an economic impact study on the golf course. And they said, look, if you build the golf course, players will come. And oh, by the way, it's going to generate a fair amount of significant economic activity, new lodging, food and beverage, buying gas, and real estate development and real estate taxes. So that was the next component. So then members of the Tourism Association went before the county board, and I think Commissioner Wes Hedstrom was the chairperson at the time. And Wes said, look, you got all these components, looks good. Geez, we're going to hire some consultants to figure out how to make this thing work. And I think this was like in 88 or 89. And they hired, the county board at that time hired David Saline, does that ring a bell, Commissioner? And Arlene Welty. And they said, hey, this is great, county, but you should really create an EDA to do this. And so the Economic Development Authority was created to take the golf course to the next level and work with the county. And it became a joint Economic Development Authority with City of Grand Marais, of course. So that was in place. And then the EDA hired the consultants, David and Arlene, and said, okay, pro forma, if we're going to build this thing, the county's going to have to issue some bonds. How do we pay for it? Because we know we got a short season. So we went to the state legislature in 1988. I think Scott Harrison did that. I met with then Senator Doug Johnson, who was senator from Cook. He was a tax chairman committee chair, and he said, look, okay, great. We can give you 2%. We'll support that. Matter of fact, that will do the bonds based on what the consultants said. But we're going to initiate 3% lodging tax. Because you need to promote the asset. So all these components, over a period of about 4 or 5 years came into place, studies and so on and so forth. Now we got legislation, and hence lodging tax was born, Linda. And since that time, then, now listen, here's the thing. I mean, the EDA would have been created sometime, right? And lodging tax would have come along at some period of time. But the golf course initiated all that through. And since that time, I think we've generated over $40 million in lodging tax revenues from the 3 different groups. A little side point. So great. So the golf course was built, and we're moving forward. Things went well as expected. At that time, LTTA was asked to take that lodging tax and support the bonds with the bond payments, I think, as you know. So that's where some of those early dollars went on the lodging tax side. Now, again, I'm going to try to move forward really quickly. 1998, we added another 9 holes. I know that's been brought up from time to time in various discussions. And so the answer is why that happened, because at the time, by the way, that was the right decision, just based on the information that was happening and the data that supported it. There was good activity at Superior National. The national golf frenzy was growing. It was at the time it was the right decision, and that also 9-hole expansion gave us the canyon holes. And for those of you who've been out there, James, we've been out and touring around, and others. That has really set apart the golf course. So that 9 holes also played an additional role there. Okay, fast forward as quick as I can. 2010, we all know what happened in 2010. The hospital tax was sunsetting. So, and I think Brady determined that that 1% at the time could amortize about $22 million in bonds. And so, hence from that, the YMCA was born. There was a commitment to fiber optic, the library, right, Birch Grove, and all these different programs came as a result of that. And we came, when I say we, it's largely LTTA and the members of the Tourism Association, who, by the way, were, they it was all volunteer. It was, we didn't have a general manager, we weren't paying anybody, so we were just ushering this forward because it was an important amenity. So 2010 comes and everybody's coming to the table and saying, look, we've got some ideas like the YMCA and the library and some other things. We came and said, hey, we have an idea. The golf course is 20 years old, like a house, right, or like an asset. They get tired, they needed some capital improvements. So we proposed about a $1.8 million to the board project, and that we had consultants up, also pro bono, who came up and said, let's expand the irrigation system. It's old, it's 20 years old. We couldn't get replacement parts anymore with the electronics. Let's replace the sand, it was tired, and some drainage issues. So that was the proposal that we came forward to the board at that time, 2010. I believe Commissioner Sabania was the chairperson at the time, and he said, look, okay, thanks for your proposal, but we're going to hire our own consultant, the county. We want to look at the big picture of the golf course. So I think a gentleman named John Waite was hired and worked for the county, and he said, I have a better idea. Let's go to 36 holes, and let's take a clubhouse and make it a big deal. And it was about an $8 million project at the time. Securing the additional land was challenging, so it was brought back to $4.5 million project, and which then proceeded to move forward. There was some money from the IRRB, it's all outlined in here. And so that puts us to where kind of we're at today is the golf course did move forward, and when I say again, the Tourism Association called the Board of Governors, or Mary, what we call the operating committee or something like that. Management team. We were asked to step aside, which was fine at the time, but then the county board came back and said, look, we got this great plan, this great idea, we're going to spend $4.5 million. We want a guarantee again on the lodging tax to amortize the 2.4 million in tax abatement bonds. And we're going, well, okay, this is a beautiful plan, but your consultant says 24,000 rounds, and by the way, that will not happen. It just hasn't, and it won't, and look where we live, right? You'd have to expand the fall by a month and have spring come a month earlier to even get close to 20. So we were concerned at the level of rounds that were predicted to support the bond payments. But we moved forward, and we came back to the county and said, look, if you want the guarantee of the bonds with our lodging tax, we want to manage the golf course because it's in the best interest that we take a close look at managing the golf course. And that being, we being, again, business owners in the area on a volunteer basis, because we had a lot at stake here. So the golf course, now I want to move forward today. By the way, what your consultant did back then, beautiful. The golf course is unbelievable. It took an incredible piece of real estate, hard to say, but made it better. So what came out of the county's plan back in 2010, 11, 12, when we went through this process, was really quite a masterpiece. But it's something we didn't ask for. And it's something that was given to us to say, in one respect, solve the problem. Because we knew that the level of activity just would be very, very difficult to support moving forward. We have. And what we've done as fiduciary to the county and to the gentleman over there who manages the bonds is we've kept that golf course on budget. We have not come to the county, the taxpayers, in the 30-year history of that golf course. There may be some exception about, okay, the EDA, and you got staff and things there, and some costs. I get that. I think, Brady, you can confirm the fact that, nothing has come from the county in terms of levy property tax dollars and to support that asset. Okay, so where are we at today? Moving forward. We have a beautiful golf course. Make no mistake about it. But we have been fiduciary for all these years, and we knew that having this debt load with unrealistic rounds was going to create a problem. And the problem it's created is that we're in the bone marrow. we're in the bone marrow on expenses. We balance the budget. We have all, every year. It's difficult. So now we come to the EDA. The EDA owns the golf course. And we're going, what? And then we had a planning session. We had this spring, we hired a consultant to kind of do the strategic planning. And what she did was really masterful, I thought. I mean, she just brought to the table everything that we kind of knew, but we had to bring it out. And what came out of it was like, oh, yeah, looking forward, there's going to be some problems. We have the most beautiful, and listen, I mean, I golf, and I golf around, and I'm out there, I was out there with a couple local people not too long ago, and we stopped. I go, you can't be, look at this. It's unbelievable, the beauty. It's unmatched. And so I don't want to compromise the golf course moving forward, or compromise the county, or this community, or what Visit Cook County does by not paying attention to, I think, what is going to be needed in the future. I mean, so we've come to the EDA, and through our planning session with our consultant, strategy planning, it's like, yeah, there's going to be some working capital issues in the future. I think our management team, frankly, we did an unintentional disservice to the county. To the golf course. We loved it to death, and we've never had a general manager. We've never had a marketing person. Yeah, Mary has been there from day one. I mean, and the time that she put in. So there's been a lot of, if you will, subsidies in one respect, because people just loved it. Mike Davies, our superintendent, he developed. James, you were there. I think when we talked about the culture he developed over 30 years of guys, larger guys, who would work for $12 an hour or $13 an hour because they were semi-retired, they loved golf, and they did everything. Well, listen, we all know about COVID. It changed a lot of things, and it certainly changed the face of labor, right? We all know that. So part of what came out of this meeting was, wow, looking forward, we got to start talking with the EDA, because I'm concerned, frankly, that I just don't want to see this asset not be what it should be. And again, 2010 came, and we got some reinvestments because assets get old. And so looking forward, we need to look to see how to continue to have that asset be what it is. And also, I think, as you know, in your package, and I'll close up here, it's kind of interesting. You go back to when the golf land was pledged, and Mary had put this all together. It's in your package, and so I'll just cut to the chase. But in 2001, I think the land tax around the golf course was $300 because it was just one big parcel, and now there's 43 lots there, and it's generated well over $1 million in tax revenues and about $18 million in home improvements, and there's 4 new homes going up. So that would not have happened if not but for the golf course. And so it's kind of a unencumbered annuity to the county with the revenues that have been created because of the activity around there. So, this isn't an ask, or this isn't a proposal. This is like, okay, I think, COVID and everything else and what's happened in this world has changed, and we need to start looking forward. And so we're working with the EDA. We're looking for potential solutions, funds, who knows what it is, but it's just more of bringing this to your attention. And if I know James has been out there, I think most of you have been out there, but listen, if you want to come on, hop on a car with me, let's go. Because it's really, like Steve said in his presentation, it's part of the fabric of this community. And so that's my long-winded sorry summary of all this.
Thank you. Good job. Mary, do you have information you'd like to share with us? Because maybe we could move the microphone over. Oh, sure.
Linda, how did I do?
So I want to clarify when Mike said we've never had a general manager. We've always had a general manager, but he's never been paid. Scott Harrison dedicated thousands of hours to the golf course over the years, from pre-development until, well, still, he's currently the chair of the Board of Governors right now as we sit here. So the loan agreement that was signed between the county and the EDA at the time of the renovation, that was completed in 2018. The loan agreement requires some capital investments. I'm not going to quote the numbers. I meant to bring them so I could say the right numbers, but so much per year is required to be reinvested in equipment and capital improvements. It's like $150,000 adjusted annually for CPI or something like that. So we're in compliance with that requirement, but what we're not able to do is larger capital reinvestments like a new roof on the clubhouse, which is 30-some years old, or other things on the grounds. There's twice stated in the loan agreement that we're obligated to keep the golf course in the condition as it was at the completion of the renovations, so that history is not repeated. That language is actually in that agreement. And we don't want to repeat that history. Nobody wants that. But anybody that's ever had a piece of property or a building knows that you have to reinvest in big ways over time. So that's one point that I think needs to be made super clear. Two other things required in the loan agreement in this year. 2023 is 5 years after completion of the renovation. We are required to bring in a consultant in golf course grounds management and another consultant in marketing. And both of those consultants will work with us to prepare 5-year plans, which, you know, you can make a 5-year plan, but you have to adjust it as life goes, right? No, life will never be the same. We know that uncertainty is the only thing that's for sure right now. So, that's why we're not asking you for anything specific today, only presenting you with information. After we meet with those consultants this fall, we'll probably be back to visit with you again sometime next winter and share more information with you. But I think, as you saw in your packet, I'm pretty sure it's in here on the last page, that we either need to find a way to find more financial support for the golf course to support the capital improvements. You're all very familiar with capital improvement needs. We've wondered amongst ourselves if the golf course couldn't be in your capital improvement plan. It's a publicly owned, it's not owned by the county, it's owned by the EDA, but it's a public asset. So that's a question. And if we can't figure out how to keep the golf course at the caliber that it is today as a destination golf course, then we might have to think about selling it. Because we just can't go backwards. We have to go forward in a good way. So, all that being said, we're here to answer questions or hear any feedback that you have for us.
Well, I appreciate the packet with the history. I think all of us have had a chance to go to Superior National. I mean, I remember riding horses out by Superior National.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember it a long time ago. And bears going across the fairways, and it's a very unique, very beautiful place. But seeing all of the history and everything put together chronologically is really helpful. So I think that is a valuable piece for all of us to have. Do commissioners have questions or comments? Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you for coming today. I am really happy this is finally being talked about. We need to talk about this. Some know that I have made an issue about. I think the golf course is wonderful. It is an asset to our community, and we need to, if we're going to have that in our community, we need to take care of it and keep it up to standards. I love stand there too. I don't golf, I've never golfed it, but I have walked it more than once and stood there and thought, wow, this is gorgeous. And so it is an important asset. I have been having concerns for quite a few years about the financials and seeing the numbers that it didn't. I was worried it wasn't going to pay for itself at some point. Now, thankfully, we haven't had that problem of having to subsidize before, but you could see the writing on the wall. We were very grateful for Scott Harrison and all the free hours that we got helping take care of that facility. And so we know we have a choice to make, and it'll be interesting to see what the dollar figure is. But I also would like to point out, I like you talking about the fact it was the county board at that time that made that decision. It kind of divided our community at the time, I remember that. And I just want to say it was a 3-2 vote. You can go and look who were the ones that voted against that. Just put that up there. I won't mention any other names, but that's what, so that, I just want to say that. So we are in a difficult spot, but I'm really grateful you're here. We're having this discussion. These are going to be some hard discussions, but I'm really glad we are talking about it publicly. That's my comments.
Commissioner White.
What are the ramifications of it being sold to a private company, firm, person?
Well, if we can find a buyer that can pay off the bond debt and pay whatever we don't have any idea what the value of that at. We don't know what the price is to sell that. And there would be a lot of legal discovery that would have to occur because of the agreements with the Nelson family when the land was given. We don't know. It's been a long time since we looked at that. So the ramifications at the end of the day, if it was sold, if that process was completed, then the county would have no more obligation or control over what happens at the golf course.
Did somebody do something really bad to wreck the golf course? That would be a negative thing? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. But is it that fees would be increased so much that it would really?
Those are all unknown questions. I mean, we would have to probably include some language about the intent of a buyer to continue to operate. But I don't know if that, is that a legal thing you can do? We don't know. We haven't started exploring this. We just know.
A lot of real estate, a lot of housing.
Oh, yeah.
And more to come.
No, she's talking about on the golf course.
Golf course and make it into, I'm kidding, but, you know. It's
Be
like-
careful what you say.
No, you have to have the document. That's where you need a lawyer because really there's language in there that might not be able to happen.
Right.
Right.
I think it's important to also know, I believe it was in the packet, that the plat that we're all aware of, the heritage on the east side, if you will, of the river. And then on the west side, on a preliminary basis, there are about 75 home sites that have been identified by the water and sewer and all other things. Now, that hasn't come to fruition, but that will someday.
Because of the golf course.
Yeah.
I would say exclusively but for the golf course, absolutely. So that's another component here, I think from a county's perspective, when you're looking at, gee whiz, okay, we got more home sites, and our real estate tax revenues and our development. Yes, that's an important part looking forward, that it's really, really important that that golf course remains healthy because, if that does happen, I'm certain that that plat would go forward, just a matter of time. It will go forward as a matter of time. The golf course needs to be healthy.
Commissioner Storley, any comments or questions you have?
I don't have any questions. I've been involved with the golf course a long time. I volunteered landscaping and some of the pieces are still there. I still do a little bit of work with the gardening, and I've watched it over the years, and it's a priceless piece. And I just hope that the consultant that you're meeting with in the fall will have some good and positive and good reviews, but also lay on the line that this is what you need to look at.
We haven't advertised for that yet. We have to prepare a request for proposals for both the grounds and the marketing, so we don't know who that is yet, but we're taking this very seriously.
If I may, just Commissioner White, you asked a good question about moving forward with the private sector. Who knows? All those things. But here's what I think. It's just my opinion. I don't think that's the right move. I think it deserves to belong to Cook County. It's deserving of that. I think the EDA, it's really the EDA's job. We'll explore that and what is required to go down that road, but I just don't think that's the answer. I think it's important that it stays here. So that's my response on that.
Well, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of discussion about that. I know we have another group still waiting here, but one more question.
One more
Thank you.
question, because this is an EDA asset. I get it, it's county, but it's EDA, which is a joint
Right.
entity with the city. Has the city been approached for their perspective on helping with this situation? Is there plans to go before the city council?
Steve and I met with Mike, and you see that Mike and Dave Turstig are here today because we were sure to email them this information prior to the meeting. And we have not spoken yet with the council. We wanted to come here first and learn what we could today, but sure that we will be looking to meet with Mike and Dave and the city council and explore what that could look like.
Well, I
Good-
would think
good
this
point.
is kind of like the HRA issue. Yeah, so it's very important that we have communication back and forth between all people involved to make sure we're all on the same page.
And please make sure after you meet with your consultants to let us know ASAP, so we can come back and hear from you about what your findings are. That's really important to us.
I'm pretty sure that we're gonna target October for the grounds consultant because the way the weather has been.
Yeah,
the
it
golf
can't be
course
later
has
than
been-
that.
No, but the golf course has been very busy.
Right.
And I don't know that we want to mix that work
Right.
in with a
Right.
good season of good play. But it'll be towards the end of the year,
Okay.
probably, November, December,
All right.
I think. But that's only a guess.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming here today, sharing the history, and getting the conversation started.
Have you been to the golf course? If you
Field
wanna
trip.
go for a ride, I'll take you for a ride. If you want to go for a tour.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to Dustin and Rena for waiting patiently. We'll readjust our microphone here.
You guys need a break or anything here?
I think we're fine.
Okay. I see Deb
We have
stuck
people
out.
that are going to need to leave.
Yep, she told us that.
Yeah.
I'm above broadcast, so.
Hey, James.
I feel like ours is so short and simple compared to the last three presentations.
Right? I'm like, okay, like, I really appreciate you guys sticking us in on such a busy agenda. I really appreciate
You
it.
just never know how it's going to shape up.
Yeah.
But I would say, you talked about 3 topics I like: kids, art and music events, and golf.
There you go.
So,
And trash.
We try to cover
and now we're
it
going to
all.
talk trash. Now we're just going to talk trash.
Try to cover it all.
And is this live? Oh, they're not.
This is live.
We are live.
We are live. We're just
So I'm
waiting
talking
to have a
trash.
quorum.
Okay.
I'm a live mic.
I'll wait till the other two come back.
Yeah.
So looks like another nice day, though.
Do you golf? Have you been to the course?
Yeah, I do the women's league on Wednesday nights, so get out there. And I wouldn't really call what I do golf.
Okay.
But
Swatting.
I go out and swing my club around and chase balls all over the place.
That was me too. Just to get the views, just to get the exercise.
You know, I worked there last summer, and I'd get there at 5:30 in the morning and just be out there by myself, and it was spectacular out there.
Well, we're going to continue with our final agenda item, which is our bonding application for North Shore Waste Transfer Station. And we'd like to thank Rena Rogers and Dustin as well for coming this afternoon. Yeah, it is this afternoon. And thank you for your patience and waiting for this opportunity.
Well, thanks for having us today. I don't think we're going to take very long. We wanted to give you a brief update and about where we're at. And also, as we move forward, depending on how some of these things play out, what we will need from the county board in terms of support if they choose to support this project like that. So we've been, at this really for just a little less than a year of really starting to talk about this in the community and starting to look at what value a transfer station facility would bring to this community in terms of making the way we manage our waste here sustainable. As we know, like this last year, the cost of diesel fuel skyrocketed, and that has a tremendous impact because everything that's collected here has to go all the way down the shore to the transfer station in Duluth, and then from there, it has to be put into semis to it's taken to the landfill over in Superior, a little beyond Superior. And so those costs, the transfer costs, the taking it from, somebody else taking it, those all got added, and it has an impact. And that impact is absorbed actually by a very small number of people and businesses. And so managing how we do we're not ever going to have another landfill here. It's very difficult to start up a landfill. The one that we use currently is it will be closed at the end of 2026 because it's full. And so the one that's being proposed is in Canyon, up on the range, and that's further away. So just by virtue of the fact that it's going to be there, if nothing else changes, our costs go up because that's further. So currently, when trash is collected, it's collected, the, what do you call those? Packer trucks that go around. And the Packer trucks, because once you collect household waste, it's considered hazardous waste. Because it maybe has dirty diapers in it, or food waste, or, medical things, or whatever else. And so you cannot take it out of those Packer trucks in the open air. The only way it can be transferred into a semi for hauling is if you're in an inside facility. That's why every day our, Barry or whoever has to drive the truck from the previous day all the way down to Duluth and, put it in that transfer station, that inside facility where it can be put into a semi from there and then transferred on. So that cost is significant for a lot of reasons. A Packer truck gets about 3.5 miles a gallon, and they're not really built for that, for that kind of highway driving and on and on and on. If you were to be able to unload that here in an inside facility, which is what we've proposed, easily moving that from a platform to the top of a semi, you could get 2 or 3 days worth, or 2 or 3 truckloads worth in that. And now the semi is going to get 6.5 or 7 miles to the gallon, but you're taking maybe 3 times as much in one trip. So obviously, that's a great way for us to maintain costs on a very small community. So that's what's being proposed. Dustin's been working with the architects. He's been working, he purchased the land. He's done the wetland studies. He's done all of these kinds of things. The architects, I think, are telling us for the base building, not with the solar panels and the electric vehicles, but it will be built to accommodate those in the future. We're thinking about $4.5 million, which is a significant chunk. Also in this last year, and actually in the last 3 months, they purchased, North Shore Waste purchased the business that was on the west end of the county, Nelson's. And so now North Shore Waste manages waste management for the entire county, including Grand Portage, and also for the eastern section up to about Finland of Lake County. So it's significant, the work that they do, which is really, I like to say, it's public health, managing that in an environmentally friendly and sustainable way, and trying to also manage the economics of that. So that's kind of the why. So we started trying to figure out how could we get some help funding it, because adding a $4.5 million building from a private company to do that, he would have to recapture that in terms of rates for the customers. And let's just think about what that would mean across 50, 100 people that live here in small businesses. So trying to look for, some public help. And this kind of capital thing, money going to a private entity is very difficult to do, because bonding and many grants want to put that instead to a county or to a city or some other government entity. We've knocked on a lot of doors and made a lot of relationships, and we have a lot of people that are all behind this and trying to figure out ways to help us. So one of the things that we have in right now, and we haven't heard anything yet, is a request for congressional discretionary spending, the federal government, and that's part of $87 million, I think, that our senators can spend in the state of Minnesota. And it's money they can spend on, I don't know all the rules, they haven't really published those, but we have that request in to both Senator Smith and Senator Klobuchar. And we did, and James, by the way, these kinds of requests that we put into other government entities, we can't submit those have to be submitted through another government entity. So at this point, James has the account, and we wrote the stuff, and then he put it in for us. So that will get to one of my points. As we move forward with that relationship needs to be contractual between us. At this point, those are placeholders to see if we can even make that happen. The other thing that happened, which is fascinating, was we talked right away. We were in Senator Hochschild's office with Judy Erickson, the county's lobbyist, when I think it was the first week of the legislative session. We literally were there, got 15 minutes with him, and he was very interested in this, and we had some conversation about bonding. There was bonding left over that was in this session, but there was a long list of people who had already applied, and so we said, well, can we do bonding in the future? And as we kind of followed a couple of the paths, like you have to check in with PCA or you have to check in with whoever, and they have to recommend you for bonding, we started running into this bonding is only for public entities again. The county would have to own the building, or the county would need to own the land, and they would have and maybe own it, and then North Shore Waste would manage it, and that would be a contract. And so that wasn't doable on a lot of different levels. So we kind of I thought, well, okay, it's not going to happen. And about middle of June, I get an email from Linda over there saying, Judy and I would like to meet with you. Something's changed. And I'm like, okay. So got on a Zoom call with them. And what was interesting in this session is that because of the big surplus that the county or that the state had, And because next year's a bonding year, what the legislature did is they said, next year our bonding target for the bonding session is $1.6 billion. 800 million of that will be regular bonding, where the state goes out and secures bonds, and those are like loans, right? And then the other 860 million, we're going to put it up as cash, as a cash option. So now there are two pots of money. So the one that recently, that you all did a resolution on, will go on that first one, because that'll just be regular bonding, because it matches that, because it's a public entity. But the cash option opened up an opportunity for a business like North Shore Waste, which is providing a public service, really, that if they weren't there, the county would have to figure out how to do. They're providing that service for the public, and yet it's a private entity. So there was an option here that hadn't been available before. And so, the comment was, it has to, be in. At least you can work on it as it goes, but you have to get it in by a week from Friday, and it was like Wednesday. And it's like, do you think you can do that? I'm like, yeah, I think so. Lots of coffee, and so we got it in. And again, James and Jana, thank you very much. I had it all written up, and they entered it, and we got it in there. So it's in there, and it's been submitted. So we don't know what that means. With bonding, we know that in statute, it's very clear, like if the county gets that and then they were to sell the building that they bonded for or whatever it was, they would have to pay the money back to the state. There's all kinds of things in the statute around bonding, but this cash option, I couldn't find anything online. So we're not really sure what that means, or, once it moves along, it goes now, as you probably know, it'll go through, and they'll start doing their field trips in August and coming and interviewing, and the committees that work on the bonding stuff will keep moving along, and they'll have a proposed list that they send to the governor, and then the governor will take that list and put it to the legislature next January, and then all the, horse swapping and trading and carrying on goes on. So one thing I didn't mention about these two pots of money, they don't get approved separately. They go into one bonding bill, and even, they'll have, even though they'll have different requirements likely, they have to still be approved by the legislature in that 2/3 vote. So it will follow the same process in parallel. It's just that the requirements associated with it will be a little bit different. Did I get that all right, Linda? You were sitting in on it.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Just regarding the tour that you mentioned, the bonding tours. There's one that's conducted by the House, one that's conducted by the Senate, and just as recently as yesterday, I'm working with Cook County Historical Society. Those are driven not by the chamber or Judy.
Right.
They're driven by Scraba and the House, and Hochschild and the Senate. So just so you know,
Right.
I've got my ears up and waiting to
Right.
be involved in those interactions.
And I would say, in talking with Judy, that both Scraba and Hochschild are on board with this project.
Mm-hmm.
And Scraba is the Republican member from the House, that's a Republican member from the House that's on the bonding committee. So we have good representation for this, and there's a lot of, I think, good synergy and energy for it. So that's kind of the backstory, that's the update. So where we're at is two things that I think need to happen. One of them, for the state bonding, one of the requirements that we have is that we need a resolution from the county board, much like the one you passed a few weeks ago, saying that you're in support of this funding from the state of this project. And I think that's a simple request. Once that's passed, that resolution then gets attached to our application for this bonding. The second thing and we've had some other meetings, and I know you were at one, Stacy, and what does this relationship with the money mean? And how does this all work? And this, the county is the vehicle for getting the money and managing that bond, and yet it's going to a private entity. There's a lot of questions there about liability, about maintenance of the building, about what happens if they sell the business. There's a lot. And part of the difficulty with coming up with a specific contract right now is we don't know the rules that are going to be attached to that cash option or to the congressional discretionary one or to other opportunities that may come out there. So in talking with James and kind of talking through with Dustin, kind of what I'm seeing here, kind of my experience, is that we sit down and we have sort of an umbrella use agreement. We've been calling it a joint powers, but I don't think it's joint powers. I think it's some sort of a use agreement that defines, the roles and responsibilities, who maintains it, who has liability for the building, who keeps the insurance. And a lot of that is to protect the county, in my opinion, in terms of, what happens with a private entity doing that. And I think there's that kind of a very broad thing, and I think then what happens is once you get a specific one, if one of those were to happen, let's say it was the congressional one or the bonding one, you would have a specific amendment added to that umbrella one that would address the particular terms of that pot of money. Because I don't think we can see in advance in an agreement all of the things when we simply don't know. And I think that agreement, we would need to have, that umbrella agreement, would need to have in place by the end of October, I believe, is the timeline that goes.
October 13th.
Yeah, or middle of October.
Yeah.
I don't perceive this to be a difficult thing to put together. I used to sit with Molly all the time and get her schedule. All right, just an hour and a half, we're going to sit here, and she would type up a contract. She's very good like that, almost while we just discussed it back and forth. And I think that's that kind of process. Perhaps you want James to be sitting in there or Commissioner sitting there. We haven't, we're just bringing these ideas to you today, but these are going to be the two things that we're going to need from the county board in terms to even be able to accept these funds should we be awarded them.
Okay.
That's pretty much what I had today.
And that's really helpful. I mean, it's the resolution, it's a user agreement that can have something written into it indicating there could be additional amendments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dustin, anything you'd like to share with us?
I think Rena did a pretty good job summarizing it all. We've been talking about this for many years at North Shore Waste, trying to improve how we manage solid waste in Cook County.
Mm-hmm.
And, it started before, but from the start of COVID and the amount of people that have moved up here, tourism that has
Mm-hmm.
increased, we're fighting from our knees every day, just trying to manage the solid waste that there has. And you would say, well, why did you buy Nelson's? And, the opportunity was there. We wanted to expand that way. And now adding Nelson's on top of it, it's just, we can't believe the amount of waste that is produced in Cook County that we're trying to manage. We're sending, just today, we're sending 400 yards. So picture the big semis that we have. 4 semis today of just solid waste. That's today. And then we got to get prepared today, reload this afternoon, so we can do that again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So every day this week, we plan on sending 400 yards of solid waste out of Cook County.
And that's like construction waste, right?
Construction waste and garbage, and yeah. So this is obviously the busiest time of year too. So we're sending that much solid waste this week, and we're still going backwards.
You have to send those in the trash trucks. I mean, you're not putting it in.
And we're
the
talking
semi.
demolition and garbage.
Oh, okay.
Yep, exactly.
The
And
demolition gets
construction,
done.
right, and construction is
Okay.
just out of control up here as well. So we're managing all of the construction waste and all of the garbage for the county, right?
That's really something to picture, is 4 semis every day.
Right.
That is a very helpful
Yeah.
visual for me.
Right.
Commissioner Storley, you had a question.
Well, just a comment that it's really important that some of us try to get to the bonding tours. I have been to several, and they give you like 15 minutes. You better be very precise, but you know, as a group or individuals or whatever, because that's really important. That's why they're here. So hopefully you can let us know when they're coming, either the representatives or the senators, and usually it's in the fall.
Yep.
And we'll be on board.
Okay. And they're very much like the sessions that we had last winter with Senator Hostchild. 15 minutes, very focused. You need to have it, give them print, and have everything ready to go. And I know you will.
Yeah.
I know you will. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate all you do for our county, all those semis you haul out every day, and keeping us in good shape.
So just kind of as a next step, I'm kind of wondering if at a future board member meeting sometime within the next month, if we could do a resolution, put it on the agenda to do just a resolution of support, so we can get that piece in. That would be very helpful. And then I know Molly is extraordinarily busy these days, keeping Cook County safe. But you know, it would be helpful if we could get some, maybe in, once this big trial she's in right now, get some of her time and get kind of, I don't know what she knows about all this, or.
I've talked to her already, but the parameters of it are still unknown. So.
Okay.
Yeah. But Rena, I just want to say I'm really glad that you brought up the public health aspect of this, because there's so much about this project that relates to public health. It is in the county's interest to make sure that we have a modern, efficient, and clean way of processing household waste. And you know, the way things are set up at the transfer station currently, we don't really have that, because you're having to process a lot of that stuff in the open. So this would be a benefit to everybody who lives in Cook County, and I'm really grateful that you guys are thinking about the future and about better ways of doing this work.
I think we've made the business case in these applications that it's an environmental concern, because even though it's construction waste and not household hazardous waste, it's sitting on the ground, and you know, there's maybe PFAs or other things that rain or snow falls on that and can leach into the ground, into the groundwater. So we've made the environmental case. We've made the case that Grand Portage is part of this, and that's an important piece that serve all of the county. We've made the case about fossil fuels and building a building that in the future can accommodate electric vehicles and solar panels. So we've made that case that the design of the building will have that, so that you can add on to that. And we've made the case about, you know, economically that it's sustainable. So those are all big things that both the federal and the state government are extremely interested in. So I think, you know, hopefully we get, you know, we got lucky with the way the finances were at the state, and we have this other option, which might not have been available to us, probably wouldn't have been at any other time. So we're just riding this wave.
The question is, and if you have when you have this facility, you'll be able to, change how construction refuse is brought in, because at this point, like often there's sheets of plywood, I'm just speaking from experience, and 2x4s, and not enough of any of it for one contractor just like, let's just keep this for another time. It's economically more feasible if you can't give it away to somebody right then and there to haul it away, to trash it. I mean, it makes your heart hurt of the amount of stuff that is usable that just goes to the landfill. But so I guess the question is that part of, is this space, will it have an area? I mean, this is not like tomorrow, this might be in years, but to be able to create something to salvage more of everything.
Yeah, so I don't have an answer today to that question, but the facility that we're building, we're trying to put together a plan that is for, the next 50 years or more. And so second and third steps of this plan include things like that. We talked about composting, we talked about recycling, we talked about having one facility that everybody can come to and manage all of the solid waste in Cook County without having to haul it down the road. And your question about that might be answered in some of those steps moving forward.
And just to reiterate, though, none of those things can happen without, like, a facility
Yeah.
for doing
Yeah.
this, right? And
Absolutely.
ironically, you can get money for all those other things like crazy,
Yeah.
like, if you already had a building, the federal government would be happy to cover it with, solar panels, or, and some of the things now, or electric vehicle chargers. There are lots of things out there that don't say it has to be for a public entity. But with that infrastructure cost of building a building like that, that capital thing is very difficult. And we're looking at other things too, depending on how these things shake out. We found that there's a federal program that you can borrow, I think it's up to $2 million, interest-free over 10 years. That still would have to be paid back, and there's still a cost, but that can make up some of the gap of some of this. So there are other things. That one doesn't have to go through the county, by the way. That one is very interesting. It has to go through an electric co-op. So Arrowhead would have to be the conduit there. So,
So there's certainly lots of opportunities.
Yes.
But the one thing this group wants to do is make sure we support you.
Right.
And we'll look forward in the next month or so to discussing with you again.
Thank
all
you.
right. Thank you. Thanks for your
Absolutely.
support.
Really.
Yeah, it is. So we have minutes of our standing committees that are provided for the Airport Commission, Budget Advisory, Highway Advisory, and Personnel. And with that, we are adjourned.
What is in the